Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the end of the world, and also to another episode of Media Surf. My name is Patrick Leahy.
And you have the other co-host, Sebastian Ospina. And we have a very special guest today.
That's right, we have a special guest who does not have a microphone with him. He does not have to speak if he would like to, but he's welcome to interject, hoping that his voice will be picked up by one of our microphones, probably Sebby's because he's sitting a lot closer to him. But it's our good friend Chris, who we mentioned on the last episode as thinking he was the culprit of the prank call scandal.
Which is still unsolved.
Still unsolved because Chris is adamant that it wasn't him, and we've chosen to believe him. Potentially against our better judgment, but you know what? We're just going to roll with it. So, anyway, I prefaced this episode by saying, I said, welcome. I'm sorry, not preface. I introduced this episode by saying, welcome to the end of the world. And that's because it's a rather interesting day right now.
Definitely. And but before we start with our first topic, which is definitely the topic at hand right now, let me just start with saying, Pat, how are you today?
You know what? I'm wearing a tropical Hawaiian shirt I got from Kohl's for $6.50 at a clearance sale. And I'm doing well. How are you doing, Sebi?
Honestly, I'm doing great. This air quality right now is kind of crazy. We'll talk about it, but I'm here with my two good friends wearing the same exact shirts for
Yes.
$6.50.
I should preface this. We're all wearing the exact same shirt.
Literally, as we're speaking, the three of us are all wearing the same exact shirt.
Oh, yeah.
It is the greatest thing known to mankind. So, why wouldn't I be good today? It's a good day today.
It's a good shirt. Let's not pretend like it's not.
And even though he doesn't have a microphone, Chris, how are you doing today? He just gave a thumbs up, so we're good.
Yeah, it's exactly what he did. Okay, so anyway, the reason I opened this episode by saying it's the end of the world is because at this current moment, New York City, which we are not in technically, we're on Long Island, right by the border of New York City by Queens, but New York City is currently, I believe, I could be wrong about this, it has the most polluted air in the world. It's either that or adjacent to New Delhi or something. It's bad. It is very bad. And that's because we're getting a lot of residue from forest fires that are going on in Canada right now. I was actually at work this morning and everything looked orange and a kind of amber color, like I was in Blade Runner 2049. It was quite a scary sight. I'll say it smelled great. It smelled like a bonfire, but as far as actually breathing in that air, it's something I wouldn't recommend. It's something that people are advising against. And yeah, it was crazy. I was coming home from work, going to my car, and I was wearing a mask. That we still have masks at our work just in case anybody gets sick. But I haven't worn one in like 2 years because we're past that point of peak pandemic. And it was so weird having to wear that again. So it's scary times we're living in. I hope it eases up soon. Some people are saying it's going to be by the end of the week or by the weekend, and I'm just hoping that we can hang in there and that nothing super terrible comes of this.
Yeah, just everybody stay safe, good luck, and all of that. It says by tomorrow around 5 o'clock should be when the air quality alert is done. We'll see because exactly what you said. It was literally like Blade Runner 2049 outside.
Yes.
It literally looked like people were posting all over Snapchat and everything saying how it was like they had the Middle Eastern like effect of the air.
Right.
That it just looked like we were in the desert.
Yeah.
Which was very crazy to think about. And to what you said about how it looked very amber on the way when you were still working, because on my way home from work, because I work outside, which also yesterday I worked 10 hours outside and then today I worked 5 hours. By the end of the shift today, I definitely did feel it. I definitely did notice it. and on my way home from work on the highway, it was very, very, very of a orange amber color on the highway, which was insane to even think about. So definitely crazy. Hopefully this is something that by next episode we're just like, hey, do you remember that time where for a couple of days it was like very weird outside and like we didn't know what was going on?
Right.
So hopefully this thing just quickly brushes over.
Yeah, hopefully it's not something we're talking about 6 months from now. But it's a scary thing. And speaking of terrible things, let's talk about Taylor Swift. I'm kidding. Taylor Swift is fine. Her music's good. But it's recently, well, not so recently in general, but it's been amped up in the media lately that Taylor Swift's getting a lot of attention from fans who are going to her concerts and spending thousands upon thousands of dollars for the best seats. That's a lot of savings for a lot of people. That's valuable money. And there are these memes out there of people selling rainwater from some of her concerts on eBay for hundreds to thousands of dollars, or contact lenses that viewed this certain Taylor Swift concert in person for an exorbitant amount of money. And I've been saying for a while that I thought the uber obsessed Taylor Swift fans were very cultish, like way too obsessed.
Yeah.
But this is the one, this like era that we're in right now of Swift fandom has kind of like really pushed people over the edge into thinking that maybe I agree with that assessment. And again, it's nothing against the average Taylor Swift fan. It's nothing against Taylor Swift's music. I think that she's very talented. I understand the appeal. But the massive obsession where people make it part of their identity is something that I'm just not quite understanding why that's happened.
Right. And this is something that, funny enough, just got brought up this weekend. Just because
Yes.
I told Pat that I went out, had a good time with my friends, and I was at this little like club kind of area, just like dance club, and Taylor Swift was on, and there's a video of me dancing to Taylor Swift and singing, and when showing him this video, he was like, you know what I don't understand is just the absolute obsession behind Taylor Swift. And to my knowledge, I didn't actually even know that it got to this level of obsession where people were selling like rainwater and people were selling like contact lenses. Because here's the thing, like, I just think that's completely just not even logical.
Yeah, and I think most people would agree with that. I think this is definitely the minority of people, but still, the fact that they exist
like
is strange.
If you want to sell like the concert ticket that
Sure.
was like front row, like I completely
I
get
get that. Yeah, like would I buy like an opening night ticket of Star Wars if I was filthy rich? Probably.
Oh yeah,
you know?
or like you have all the like you have people selling like World Series tickets.
Sure, yeah.
Like it's so like those are so cool, and I would for sure do that. But if you're gonna charge that much money for just say like contact lenses, like that's even crazy.
Right.
And like you also have, you have the Seattle Seahawks coach Pete Carroll. He chews a lot of gum, and it's like a staple of his that every single game he chews gum. Like it's not a game unless he chews a piece of gum.
Right.
There is a fan, I forget where he's from, but he's a huge Seahawks fan, and he claims that his greatest memorabilia is he has a piece of gum that Pete Carroll chewed that game that he went to, and it's like sealed in like a container, and he claims that that is his most prized possession, which I don't understand. Like you have people that literally they'll buy like game worn socks for like $900,
Right,
which like
yeah.
I really don't understand. Like shoes, I would get more, especially if it's like a basketball player, say like Michael Jordan.
Yeah, well, shoes have utility. Like, you could wear the shoes yourself if you ever feel so inclined, if they're your size, or like you know somebody who there's your size. But the socks, that's where it just gets gross.
Yeah, but yeah, I just don't get it. And exactly like what you said and what we said this weekend, that like kind of gets in the area of like little bit of a cult.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and I think for me, and this is a while before thinking Taylor Swift fans were a little out there. I had a bit of an unpopular opinion maybe like a year or so ago, year or two. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but like I had known a lot of Taylor Swift fans back when I was single. I dated a lot of Taylor Swift fans. I think I'd got into like date number 10 with some random girl I met in some dating app where they were like, I have to admit something. I am a Swiftie. I'm like, yeah, just like all the others.
yeah.
Which my girlfriend's not a Taylor Swift fan.
know-
Coincidentally, that wasn't a deal breaker or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, she thinks her music's okay, but
Yeah.
she's not one of her like top 20 artists or anything like
Yeah,
that.
ironically, I've never dated a Swiftie. I've actually dated more One Directioners than Swifties. I
See,
think
my girlfriend is a One
yeah,
Direction
no,
stan.
like I mean, my sister is also like she is the day One Direction fan in my
Mhm.
life, but most of the girls that I've dated have either been like, "Oh my god, I used to love One Direction
Right.
growing up," and like I still listen to their music, I still
Mhm.
like fangirl over them, to like girls being like, "No, like actively go out
Sure.
and go to like these events that play all their musics." Like I dated a girl that she literally went to like a One Direction like club night where literally the whole entire night at a club they were just playing nothing but One Direction music.
Well, it's funny because at my girlfriend's graduation, it turns out she's going to be seeing some One Direction concert or something in the next couple of months.
Right.
And while she was in the process of getting tickets, her mom was like, "Oh, Patrick, you're going to be single soon." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And then I put it together, like, "Oh, okay, got it." Yeah, maybe One Direction will be another episode. But yeah, on the topic of Taylor Swift, I kind of assessed a while ago that I thought her fans were obsessed to a degree that was concerning, because every popular thing has obsessed fans. But for the most part, I never think it's too bad when it's like, I don't know, Harry Potter or I can't even. There are a lot of terrible fan bases out there, but whatever. Harry Potter's one that I never thought was too bad, but I don't. Well, then again, I take that back. Apparently, J.K. Rowling's not the best person. Whatever. Big conversation. What set me off was when Taylor Swift released some extended version of some breakup song about Jake Gyllenhaal, and the whole song was about like, I don't know, a scarf that wasn't returned or something, and like, I don't know, he ignored her for a certain amount of time, and okay, yeah, maybe Jake Gyllenhaal wasn't the best boyfriend, but they harassed this man on social media. I mean, her fans just went after him, and I'm just like, this is bullying at this point. This is legitimate harassment, and I'm not okay with it. And I knew a lot of people who were like people I respected, people who I thought were normal, and still do, mind you. Nothing against you personally, but they just had takes that I didn't disagree with. I mean, they were just very apologetic towards this behavior, and this is a point at which I do think it's dangerous, and I do think it's cultish.
Right. And truth be told, I didn't even know about this until this weekend when we were talking about it
Mm-hmm.
on our way to pick up our good friend Chris.
There you go.
On his way to one of our hangouts.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that there was a whole breakup song against Jake Gyllenhaal. I knew Taylor Swift had a whole bunch of breakup songs, with Taylor Lautner, Harry Styles, but I didn't know that her and Jake Gyllenhaal dated. But I always knew that Taylor Swift was the queen of breakup songs, but I didn't know that it got to the longevity of him being attacked, and especially over something as simple as like a scarf.
Right, and he had to disable comments on his Instagram. And the big thing that bothers me is that they dated for 10 months. Over 10 years ago.
Right.
And this many people were still so obsessed over it. That's just... You need to reevaluate some things, okay? That's where I'm like, okay, I think you're actually in a cult. And I think I'm the authority on that because I've spoken to a cult leader. Which brings us into our next topic. Sebi, would you like to take it away? What are we talking about now?
Sure. So last episode of the podcast, we started talking about Tiger King, and we dove into episode 1, and we kind of talked about what we thought about it, just like the the aura behind it and all of that. And Pat and we both said that episode 2 was an episode that we both had to watch together.
Yes, 100%.
Since the last recording, we did hang out one night. I think it was literally just like we were hanging out one night.
Yeah, we didn't really plan on it. We just decided why not just bang it out. And we actually watched episode 3, which we'll talk about next time. Because like, I think every episode kind of deserves its own blurb of what we thought about it.
And we finally did sit down and we watched episode 2. And we knew once we decided we wanted to record today, that was going to be one of our primetime topics today, was episode 2 and what we thought about it. Because even before I started watching Tiger King, I used to have very, 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 very many conversations with Pat about how episode 2 was the quote-unquote prime time of Tiger King.
It's peak Tiger King in my opinion. You know, I hate to say that so early in the show, but yes, it's the best episode by far in my opinion. And I've told people a while. People told me all the time back in the pandemic, I tried watching it, I wasn't really into it, like I couldn't even really get past episode 1, and I'm like, I get you. I really do. Which is funny, now we've watched episode 1 and you said it had you hooked and it was crazy, and that was most of America. But even still, there were the voices who just weren't really that into episode 1. And I was one of those people. I told you about that because I was really very been there, done that with episode 1. But episode 2 just blew me away. And episode 2 really woke me up to the fact that this is unlike anything I have ever seen before. So just to recap real quick, last time on Tiger King, last week on Tiger King, whatever you want to say, we met the big cat industry. Joe Exotic, an eccentric mullet-wearing gay zookeeper in Oklahoma, and he just wants to own tigers and be famous and have his own internet show and just be the talk of the town. But he runs into trouble when this lady from Florida, Carol Baskin, who owns this big cat rescue sanctuary, starts to attack him in the newspapers, and Joe's not going to take that without a fight, so he starts making public attacks against Carol Baskin. And on the sidelines, you have a friend and business associate of Joe, Doc Antle, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, who's a lot more polished, a lot more professional. He's got a nicer facility that more people visit, but he's also very egotistical, very unhinged at points. Like, they've all got something going on, and they're all strange. They all look strange. They've all got like a weird kind of look going on about them.
Yeah, they each have, in episode 1, you at least know that it's like each character has like their own like little quirks.
Yeah.
It's just more of like, okay, by the end of this show, who's going to be like the more quote unquote quirkiest.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, even down to how they dress. I saw this great descriptor of Tiger King that said every character looks like they're wearing somebody else's clothes, which is a good way to put it. But yeah, we kind of came across that saying like it's a really crazy episode. It's a very good episode, which I come to feel now, having rewatched it many times. I didn't like it that much when I first saw it, but now that I watch it, I like it a lot. We had our rankings of who we thought were the best characters, who we thought were the worst, this, that, and the other thing. It's a good, what are we gave it like an 8.5 or whatever out of 10?
Yeah, I listened to it today. We said like a 7.
Yeah,
7
around that area. Sebi, what did you think of episode 2?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I haven't watched the whole entire series, but I can definitely say that episode 2 was definitely just wild and just so, I mean, not even 5 minutes into the episode, something absolutely insane happens and you're already like, oh my gosh, wait, what? Like, okay, like, that's going to be like the vibe of like the whole entire episode. And it is, but like, the crazy thing about episode 2 is that like, it's crazy the whole entire episode, but it's not crazy for the same reason for the whole entire episode.
Not at all.
It's like 20 minutes of one crazy, then 20 more minutes of another crazy, and then 20 minutes of another crazy. But just the whole entire episode itself is just wacky.
Yes.
And just like, how is this like possible?
Yes. Well, the best way I can put it is when you describe everything that happens in this episode, you'd almost think, well, first of all, that they're not even from the same show, let alone the same episode. But somehow everything like flows together. You're like, oh, I understand why you cut to this. I get why you meant, because this character mentioned that, which leads to that.
And I definitely do agree with you that like when I say that like each 20 minutes was like crazy, it was never like, okay, this is like random. This is, you know, like this wasn't explained, or like the last crazy 20 minutes didn't make sense, or like it wasn't finished. Like by the time each like session or section of the episode was over with its craziness, it did a good job about introducing the next part of the episode that was going to be talked about
and making it all relevant to the last thing that was referenced. It's like you never see the twists coming, but they all kind of harmonize with each other. The episode starts with one of Joe's employees, Saf, having his arm bitten off by a tiger, and then coming back to work 5 days later and saying, well, it was just another day and I don't want the media to say bad things about us. And it is by far the most normal thing that happens in the episode. It is by far. But it sets off the episode perfectly because it's this wild thing, because you're thinking, like, why does he have such allegiance to this place? Why is he not saying, I don't want to work here anymore?
Yeah, and exactly like what you say. It's just like how calm he is like throughout the whole entire, like literally he's standing there with one arm and he's fully just like, I could never not work here. Like by the 5th day I was already ready to come back and whatnot. And exactly like what you said, it definitely sets the mood of the episode, because it's like, if you think this is crazy, wait till you get to the end of this episode, because that's going to be child's play. And it was. The first like 10 minutes of the episode is child's play compared to like the rest of the episode and what they talk about.
Yeah, but it's relevant. It loops back because you've got this thought in the back of your head, what drives him to stay here? So then we cut after that to Joe's manager, the manager of DW Zoo, who works under Joe, but he's the boss of everybody else, John Reinke. Saf says, I know what you should understand what it's like to work with somebody with one arm, because I work with somebody who has no legs. And then it turns out that he didn't lose his legs from tigers. It was a ziplining accident. But when he was trying to get use of his legs again, and he would try and walk in them every day, working at the zoo for 10, 12 hours a day, he found that he was just walking on bone. So he amputated the legs, and he had the cool-looking clown legs that he still walks on to this day. Which I don't think we talked about this last episode, but John Reinke is just like such a laid-back, cool dude.
He is. He's definitely one of the most like,
by far one of the most normal. One of the most like, just like, oh, I'd like to get a beer with this guy. Not in the same way you would Joe, where I said in the last episode, I'd like to get a beer with Joe. I just don't want him to drive me home. Yeah. Like, I'm like, John's fine. John's a cool dude. You know, and Saf too. Like John Reinke and Saf, they're like totally level-headed.
Right.
Especially compared to all the other people that we've 100%. Met. So after that, we cut to Carol and Howard Baskin. Mostly Howard, because he does a lot of the talking for his wife. Howard says that this isn't just a matter of animal exploitation. This is a matter of organized crime. It's illegal to buy and sell tigers, but every private zoo is doing it, which John Reinke himself even corroborates. He says it's illegal to do it, but you'd be hard-pressed to find people who aren't selling tigers in America. Joe himself admits he breeds more tigers than anybody else in the country. So Reinke, he says some of the places they've gone to, they've been to Doc Antle's place, they've been to Tim Stark's place. We meet Tim Stark, who, by his own admission, he's got like an M4 or something. I don't remember what it was, AR-15 or something. And he wants his introduction to be him holding it
Right.
and saying, if you don't agree with Thomas Jefferson says in the Constitution, if you don't agree with the law, it's your God-given right to protest that BS law.
Now help me out.
He's not. It's believe it or not, this guy is so wild, but he's not one of the more memorable characters.
Yeah, is that the one from Miami?
No, we're not at him yet. He's from Indiana. He's got kind of like a cowboy hat.
Yes, no, yeah.
How you got the women trained? That guy.
Right.
That's him.
Yes.
We'll get to that. That's the cream of the crop of the episode. That's kind of where the episode gets its title. But
what is the title of this episode?
Cult of Personality.
Makes sense.
So, which is relevant throughout the whole episode. But we find out that this is not just a matter of corrupt business operations and immoral practices from a personal opinion standpoint. What they are doing is literally illegal. Buying and selling endangered species. So we cut to Doc Antle on a suspiciously large couch with... Well, first we see him riding Bubbles the elephant and into the lake right by his preserve, but then we see him on his couch. He's holding up these baby tiger cubs, and he's once again setting up the shot. It's like, well, what do you think we should do? Should I just hold them? Should I let them play around? Like, what do you think the shot is? Just like in the first episode where he's trying to kind of micromanage the whole operation. And he's telling the cameraman, there's nothing cooler, sexier, and more significant to the world we live in today than a tiger. And just all of this weird, like, egotistical terminology that's going on. We cut once again to Carol talking about the illegal bartering. She brings up her 911 animal abuse. There's a page about Joe Exotic. Talks about how Joe Exotic and Doc Antle trade cubs a lot. And Doc Antle's got connections to Mario Tabraue in Miami, who we were just speaking about. You want to tell us a little bit about Mario?
Yeah. And please feel free to chime in if I get anything wrong.
Yeah, I don't want to like hog the mic for this episode.
No,
so,
yeah, but I think this guy said he worked with.
Well, I actually skipped a part. There was a guy that worked with Mario, Mark McCarthy, who's in West Palm Beach.
Yes. Okay.
And he kind of got his start working for Mario at his facility, and people would even tell him like, "Why do you work with that guy? That guy's crazy." And he's like, he's got the coolest animals. I don't care about anything else. So that.
Yeah, and help me out. Mario is said to be working with Mafia. Help me out.
So Mario Tabraue is allegedly the inspiration for Scarface.
That's what it was. Yes, that he was the inspiration for Scarface, and because he got busted with a boatload of drugs, and then
100 years he was supposed to get.
And once he got out, that's when he started getting into the
animal trade.
The animal trade business. And it was like in Miami how he started his own business. But that kind of started getting a little bit shaky in terms of like what was going on at that conservation or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And also just like everybody else, like you meet this guy and you're just already like, okay, there is absolutely no way that everything this guy is doing is legal.
Well, it's so interesting too because when you meet him, he's opening up the lock to his tiger cage. He's like, everything is super secure. It's like, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And it's funny too because he says earlier in the episode, he says, I sold drugs to maintain my animal habit. And he talked about how he had an addiction for buying animals from pet stores. When he grew up, he wasn't allowed to have pets, so he bought 3 Great Danes as soon as he moved out of his mom's place. And then he bought a cougar and a panther and a lion and all this stuff from all these exotic pet stores that were around back in the day. And Rick Kirkham, the TV producer who worked with Joe, says there's nothing more addicting than holding a tiger. Like, there's this weird sense of power that you feel from it. So you got to wonder, like, how addicting is it for the drug lord to find more out of the animals than he does the drugs.
Exactly.
To use the
yeah.
drugs as a platform to get more animals.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point that you make because once, you have so many of these documentary series or docu-series, one-shot documentaries, even movies where it's like you just see how like literally like the drug lord is already like hungry for power. There's like literally like once you start there's no stopping. So it is so interesting and so crazy to even think that like someone that already experienced the lifestyle of a drug lord, of that power, of that hunger, of that drive, of that money, to say that like that was nothing compared to like holding a tiger and
yeah.
like getting tigers and like getting all these exotic animals. Like it's really crazy to think about.
Yeah, you got to wonder just how powerful it is. And it like ropes back to like what Doc was saying. He was like, there's nothing more significant to the world we live in today than a tiger. So as we hang out with Mario a little more, he starts telling us about his closest confidant in the animal industry, and that's Doc Antle. He's known him for a really long time. He's got a lot of pictures with him. He even says, we learned a lot from each other, which was a quote I found very interesting because I'm like, okay, so obviously you learned a lot about animals from Doc.
But what did Doc learn
What did
from
Doc
you?
learn from you?
Exactly, yeah.
That's what I'm wondering. So, we cut to Maria Tabraue, his wife, showing us all of her monkeys and how she says she loves her monkeys more than she loves her kids, which, of course, that's not suspect at all. But she's flipping through one of Doc Antle's books. And what do we learn? Doc Antle is a doctor of... You remember?
Oh my gosh. I don't... Help me out.
So, Eric Goode, the director, or maybe it was Rebecca Chaiklin, it was one of the directors of Tiger King. They say, what kind of doctor is he? And Maria says, mystical science.
Mystical science, that's what it was, yeah.
So then, if you weren't thinking it before, you might be thinking now, I'm like, I don't know if this guy's a real doctor. he introduces himself as Dr. Bhagavan Antle, but it's a funny little thing in the show, too. You never see him introduced as Dr. Bhagavan Antle. You see him Bhagavan Doc, quotation marks, Antle.
It's like the the quote in Toy Story 1 when Buzz and Woody are at Sid's house and Sid is playing doctor and Buzz goes, I don't think that man has ever been to medical school. As he's like taking apart the
I think
toys.
that's exactly what I was thinking when I was watching Tiger King.
Oh my gosh, me too. Like once he said that, I was like, I don't think this guy's ever been to medical school.
But Maria's flipping through the book, and this was the moment, I gotta tell you, I think I remember it happening in real time. I was watching Tiger King, and I was getting a little more hooked into it. I'm like, I'm still not 100% sure about this show. Sees this picture of one of Doc's employees that we saw before, China. Eric Goode, the director, says, who's that? Maria says, one of his wives.
Yep. So, and to what Pat said before and what I also said, how it's like looking back at like the first half of, I would say not even half, the first like 20 minutes of the episode is child's play to how it goes.
Yes.
Because now it's interesting because for the first 20, from episode 1 to the first 20 minutes of episode 2, you still go with, okay, Joe is still the most wackiest. This is like, like
Joe was by far the most unhinged of the three.
And you're like,
the most unbelievable of the three so far.
Right. And, hearing about Carol Baskin not only going after Joe, but still also at Doc,
Carol had her weird quirks. Like, she had a rivalry with Joe, had a rivalry with Doc and whatnot. But, like, I'm still like, I still believe someone like Carol exists. I just know that she's not the average woman you'd see on the street every day or something like that.
And, at this point, you're like, Doc isn't really that bad.
He's not that weird. He's not that bad either. I mean, like, you can argue that he's corrupt. He's definitely a narcissist. That's 100%. He's a narcissistic businessman, but his zoo is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous facility. And he just seems to have it so much more in order than Joe and even Carol. Like, his facility looks so much nicer. He seems to be a much more diplomatic businessman than either of the two of them.
Definitely like a lot more as much as like you can say when still being captivated, but like freedom
Right.
for the animals.
Well, that's the thing. His animals are like uncaged. They're
Yeah.
like interacting with the guests, and it's one of those things where like, okay, if you're gonna do this whole private zoo thing, you probably want to do it like Doc Antle.
Right.
Like he seemed to be like, if you're gonna do it, he's probably like the model example. And this episode kind of throws that for a loop quite a bit.
Yes, 100%. Because to that moment of help me out.
How many? It's one of his wives.
Who's the lady that says it?
It's Maria Tabrawa.
Okay. In that moment, correct me if I'm wrong, but Maria doesn't just say, "Oh, one of his wives." She like pauses, and it's like this like dramatic like pause, and she like looks and is like, "One of his wives," almost as if like this is like a crazy story.
Well, I actually have to disagree. I mean, like I've seen the episode a million times. She actually says it kind of nonchalantly.
Okay.
There's one person who does pause a little bit though, and I want to get into that. So the first thing is she says one of his wives, and the directors say how many wives he has. She's like, I think he has 3. Doesn't quite know. John Renke says Dr. Antle, he's got 4 or 5 wives. Joe Exotic, I love this. He hesitates. He's like, he has 3 or 4 girlfriends. He like doesn't want to admit that he has a harem because that's his friend, and he doesn't want to throw him under the bus. But like there he is, like defending his criminal activity.
Yeah.
And Saf says he has like 9 wives, and Eric Cowie, the guy with the long hair, he's like, how many wives does Doc Antle have? I don't effing care.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely interesting because it's not just, oh, these are his wives. It kind of gets a little bit more of
yes,
not just wives, but
well, even that's weird.
Of course, no,
but
100%.
Whatever. If you want to like have a bunch of girlfriends and call them your wives and have your own little private zoo, fine. Live your weird little hippie lifestyle. Like, not something I would do. I wouldn't personally be friends with somebody like that, but you do you. It gets a lot weirder when you find out what gets them to wifehood and how he treats everybody around him, everyone who works for him and whatnot. And it gets very uncomfortable in a myriad of ways.
Yes, definitely. I think it was this episode where I just like looked at you and I was just like, I just like feel like dirty.
Yeah.
Like listening to this.
Definitely.
Like, you literally just, you almost feel like uncomfortable listening to like what these women are like saying.
100%. Yeah. And not there's one woman who speaks out against Doc. Everybody else who works for him speaks in favor of him.
Right.
But those are the ones, it's almost like even more uncomfortable when you hear them.
Oh no, 100%.
Because you're like, they're like brainwashed. They like really don't know what's going on.
No, like that's what definitely made me more uncomfortable was because when it was the woman that spoke against him,
Barbara Fisher, who worked for him for about 8 years.
Right. Even at that, you were just like, okay, like that makes sense. Like, I would be speaking how bad that is if I was in that situation. But the same women, different women that were in the same situation, they were kind of just like, oh yeah, like
yeah, I just work every day nonstop, but yeah, I'm kind of like a stay-at-home mom, It's like, oh yeah, totally, obviously, this is very normal.
Yeah.
So like we find out all these things. Like Doc just essentially works everybody, male, female, doesn't matter, to the bone. I mean, they get no break. They barely sleep. They just work. No days off. No time home. They can't go home really often.
They don't celebrate Christmas.
They don't. Weddings, funerals, and relationships at Christmas fade away.
Yeah,
because you got to feed those tigers. And yeah, I mean, a lot of his employees change their names to these exotic Hindu names, like his name Bhagavan, which we learn in this episode means Lord, translates to Lord, which of course him being the leader of this facility, everybody looks up to him, and all that. And apparently, the best way to get to the top and get more power is if you engage with him romantically. And that's where the harem of wives comes in.
Yep.
And it just becomes so crazy to think about because as of recording this right now, Myrtle Beach Safari is still a place you can go. You can still give your money to this place. You can still visit it. You can still go on a tour and see the animals and hang out with Bubbles the elephant and look at the tigers and stuff. Like, this is still a real place in America, a business you can give your money to. And it's a literal cult.
Yeah. And what is crazy about it is that literally when you find out how old these women were when they started working, and then once
that's what makes it creepier.
And then not only is it how old they were when they started working, but it kind of also goes into what Doc thought of them as soon as they started working there. Because not only is it the women talking about when they started working, Doc is also talking about, oh yeah, I remember when she started working here, when she started working here and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's also like what we were talking about, where like you get very uncomfortable because like you see like not only their side of the story, but you also see Doc's side of the story.
Yeah.
And it is just uncomfortable.
Doc's just willing to say all of this on camera.
Yeah.
Like, these are all my girlfriends that they've been working with me for 15, 17 years apiece. And I'm like, ugh, this is weird.
Yeah.
And it's crazy too because we learn all these other things about how they live in like these horse stalls and there are cockroaches in their food and they barely get anything to eat and they get paid $100 a week. I mean, it's just totally wild.
Yeah, and that's what is like the wacky thing is like, so why work here?
Exactly.
If it's like this.
And it's the allure of the exotic animals, of getting to engage with these beautiful, incredible creatures you really can't do at other places on Earth. That's the attraction. That's what lures them in. And we'll get to other, like Joe and Carol later, but Doc takes these vulnerable young women who like just graduated high school or just started college or whatever.
Yeah, emphasis on young.
Right. And who don't really have any life experience, and he sells them this idea that this is paradise. This is where you want to come. This is the ultimate way of living, and you're going to work hard, but you're going to see great rewards, and you're going to become this amazing, wonderful person. You're going to be you're going to save the tiger. You're going to become part of my conservation mission. And it's all a sham. It's all a big ego trip for him to feel like a god. He's got this big god complex. And it's funny, his son Cody, he only has one little interview in the show, but his son Cody, who's this big social media influencer, actually bigger than Doc. He has a couple million followers on Instagram.
What does he do? Is he
He just does what Doc does. He just hangs out with tigers all day. But when he's asked about what Bhagavan means, Doc tries to like course correct. So Bhagavan means that you're a friend of God. And his son Cody is like, the Bhagavan is the master of the universe, the all-knowing, all-seeing kind of guy. So director Eric Good responds, your dad's that person, right? It's like, well, in his universe, he's definitely that guy, yes.
So, how old is Cody?
Cody's probably about 30, 31 now or something like that. He's, a young-ish guy, But,
yeah, and it's also kind of like what you said about, like, the whole, like, the pitch about why you would want to work there.
Yeah, well, there was the Tigers website. Tigers, the Institute for Greatly Endangered Rare Species is Doc's acronym for his facility. Barbara Fisher, who used to work there, said it sounded like a paradise when she read about it. It was this animal training, yoga-based facility where everybody was vegetarian and everyone was living a peaceful and happy life, and it seemed very attractive. And the allure of exotic animals, like we said before, is this very addictive thing. We saw it with Rick Kirkham. We saw it with Mario Tabraue. He mentioned it before. And we are most certainly seeing it with Doc Antle's business model.
Yeah. And it's also because it also transitions to Joe's place.
Yes. Well, here's the interesting transition is we learn all these horrible things about Doc. The way he exploits people, the way he lies through his teeth about things, his God complex, his like making people change their names and all this stuff, like it dictating the way people dress, making them be vegetarian.
Yeah. And also, something to mention is the crazy thing is, even in his interview about how, and even what you said about how he's so comfortable saying this all on camera, he's literally talking about one of the girls, and he's like, "Oh yeah, she has the bright big teeth," and like pauses.
That's
we know what he's trying to say,
right.
But he realizes he
caught
can't say it,
himself.
so he goes
Yep.
teeth.
Right. He caught himself.
Yeah.
But so we're learning all these horrible Barbara's telling us all these horrible things about the living conditions and how he would exploit people. Then we cut to Joe, who says, Doc Antle is like my mentor in the animal industry. It's like, all right, Joe,
what do you got for me?
I think I see where this is going.
Yeah.
And so you were going to talk about how
yeah,
Joe
no,
connects to Doc.
definitely how it started talking about, again, also like the pitch, because it's almost as if this, like, hey, you don't have anything in life. You don't need experience. You don't need this. You don't need that. You can have a criminal record.
Mm-hmm.
You can be homeless. You could not have anywhere to go. You come here, you will work.
Yeah.
And you will have a living, and you will experience something that not a lot of people can do.
Yeah, Joe preys on people in a somewhat different way than Doc does. They both find vulnerable people. Doc finds vulnerable people who are just starting their life, who just have entered adulthood. Now, Joe tends to marry people like that, and we'll get to that. But Joe finds people who are down on their luck and don't have anything else in life.
Yeah.
Who don't have any other alternatives, who don't have any other life aspirations, who are convicted felons, who have a record, who just won't get hired by any other place.
Like, just got a rehab.
Right.
I think one of them was talking about how, like, recovering from, like, being a heroin addict.
There are a couple of people who are just coming out of rehab who are working for Joe. They're ex-convicts, people who are fresh out of prison. And he'll find these homeless people at the bus station who have nowhere to go, nothing to eat. And he'll say, hey, listen, give you a place to stay. I'll give you a little bit of money. How about you come work for me? And they're just not really in a position to say no. And you could potentially argue that that makes him a little better than Doc.
Right.
Because on the surface, he actually is finding people in need and giving them something. Doc is convincing younger people that they need something that they don't.
Yeah.
The difference is it seems like Joe does use that vulnerability to his advantage.
Yeah, and exactly like what you said, it kind of, on the top layer, you sort of say.
You could make an argument for why Joe's place wouldn't be as terrible as Doc's.
Yeah, because you're like, okay, he's at least helping people that are in need.
Yes.
Like, these people need jobs. These people need money. These people need this. Versus with Doc, it's like, they don't, because, you know, they just graduated college. They just graduated high school.
They know nothing about the world. And Doc is trying to use that to
against
mold
them.
their perception
Yes.
of what the world truly is.
Right. And also, exactly like what you said, based on, like, who he goes after. He kind of goes after more of, like, the women.
Yeah. Well, here's something that was omitted from the documentary, to his credit. I mean, this is something he used to say a lot. He's got a lot of male employees, and he does.
Okay, see, I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, and you wouldn't know watching Tiger King. He does have a lot of male employees who are also exploited, who are also treated very poorly for different reasons. It's just, in many respects, it's a case of just him taking these people and them not having a perception beyond being like 25 years old or something, and just completely molding their world perspective around him and his showmanship and his look at me persona that we talked about in the first episode. And it's interesting because he's got it. He's got that charisma. All three of them do in many respects.
Yeah.
That they've got this kind of charisma about them that they can, I'm not saying they all do, but they can use as a weapon to get what they want.
Yep.
So.
Definitely. And help me out. Because after they start talking about who Joe hires, they then get into the interesting conversation, which is this when they start talking about his relationships? Yeah.
So Joe, like with Doc Antles being his mentor, I mean, he took that very literally, because with Doc having multiple wives, Joe has multiple husbands who are also of the same age cap, like having just graduated high school, have just entered the adult world, and are now marrying this eccentric tiger owner. It's wild to me to think that two human beings like this exist, but here we are. He's got John, who we met in the first episode. He shirtless, doesn't have a lot of teeth. He's got a set of implants that they don't really show in Tiger King, but yeah, John Finley, he's got his own thing going on. And then we meet Travis Maldonado in this episode, who was 19 when Joe met him. John Finley was 18, a couple months out of high school when they first met. And they all get married in this ceremony where they're all wearing pink shirts and stuff, and it's this really weird thing. And you just get the impression that neither of them are the sharpest tools in the shed. Neither of them are all that bright, and Joe kind of uses that to his advantage, to just as a status thing, to have these, here are these men and they love me and they work for me and they live on my park, and I'm the Tiger King, I'm the best, all that, just like Doc. It's a lot of parallels between the two, but like Joe actually admits, Joe says these words, he's got his little cult, I got my little cult. It's just two completely separate worlds. He's a little more upscale, and I'm working with people who just got out of prison. He's admitting it, which almost credit to Joe. Unlike Doc, Doc doesn't want to admit he has a cult. Doc actually denies it at one point in the interview. He yells at Eric Good for implying that. Well, I mean, Eric never even says that. But he's like, you're trying to imply that I'm in a cult. I've heard this for 35 years. Like, I've been around the block forever. Don't try to say that to me. But, I mean, Joe, credit to him. He's self-aware. He knows what's going on.
Exactly, yeah. So. And help me, again, if there is anybody that's actually the true Tiger King, I would actually dub Patrick Leahy. But
why is that?
No, just kind of like, you could help me out with this, because it then transitions to Carol.
We haven't spoken much about Carol, but yeah, she's got a decent enough presence in this episode too.
Yes.
Now, I think the biggest thing to admit, and we talked about how much Doc's employees get. They get $100 a week. Joe's get like 115, 150, something in the ballpark of that. How much do Carol's get?
Zero,
nothing. They get squat. And she says on camera, I won't pay people to do animal work because people will do that for free.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because it was the volunteer.
Now, granted, let's stress this right now. A volunteer program is not the same thing as a cult. Yeah. It's not. Okay? Nobody's living with Carol. Nobody's dependent on her. But it does tie back to this whole thing of the lure of exotic animals is so enticing that we have all these people who, they say they work all these long hours. They, like Doc's place, don't take Christmas. They don't see a dime out of it.
Yeah, because I remember, I think one of the workers was saying that she missed her father's funeral or something.
I don't know if that actually happens, but somebody said that they don't do Christmas. They don't.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Christmas.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you this really is a great tool to get people to do what you want them to do.
Right. And then obviously it starts turning into Carol's story, and then it starts going into, okay, we saw a wild side of Doc, we saw a wild side of Joe. What's the wild side of Carol? And boy, oh boy, does it do that. Because it tackles the biggest meme, probably the biggest meme.
Oh, I don't want to get quite to that yet.
Okay.
That's how the episode ends. But before we get to that, so Carol admits on camera, I don't pay people to do animal work because people would do that for free. Well, okay. I mean, you're being honest. Now, granted, I think some people were saying they were getting college credits out of it or something.
Yeah.
Doing some college program. But even still, it's like they're working all these long hours and they're really not being paid anything. You could argue that's a little messed up, and like maybe you could make comparisons between Joe and Doc. I mean, Doc even says like Carol Baskin has an army of people who are working for free. Like at least Doc's paying him something. I mean, he's really going attacking Carol with that. But we see all these people and they've got like a tier system of shirts. Like beginners are yellow shirts, and then you move up to green and then blue and whatnot, and it's a lot like the hierarchy rankings of the cults that we saw before. And once again, you could see the parallels. Am I saying that Carol's facility is as bad as Joe and Doc's? No, not necessarily. But Carol, in the episode who tries to separate herself so distinctly from those two, there really are some similarities here in how people who own animal facilities function and how their business model functions. And Carol's already got that flamboyant look at me thing. I think, I forget if it's in this episode or the next, but Howard at one point says that Carol is like the Mother Teresa of big cats.
Yes, I think it's this one. Because is this the one that they show that like wild picture of the two of them?
No, that's the next one.
Okay.
We'll get to that. But I mean, Mother Teresa of big cats, Tiger King, Bhagavan. There's a lot going on there, Yeah. There's a lot of like, I am the king of all tigers, I am the leader. I am the one everybody looks up to. So I think all three of them kind of have that going for them in a weird way.
Right.
Everyone's got like the kind of status thing that they've got going on. Everybody they just like really love to be looked up to. But one of the biggest highlights, I think this got a big laugh out of both of us, was in the first episode, we see that Joe's got music videos. He's got like, I saw a tiger.
Here, kitty.
Which we'll get to next episode.
Yes.
But, he's got all these like music videos, which actually aren't half bad. The songs are actually pretty catchy. They're pretty good. Apparently Carol's got music videos too.
Yes.
Now, they're not by Carol. They're by some other singer or whoever.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like your mind tried to repress it.
I think so.
And so Carol and Howard are on the couch showing Eric Good, the director of Tiger King, this music video called Beautiful, Wild, and Free. That's what it's called. And the singing is very off-key. The stock footage of Big Cat Rescue is like a little shaky and whatnot. And then the green screen of her in front of the cat, the lady who's singing, is so bad. And her singing is terrible. Like she goes, oh, beautiful, wild, and free. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. I think that was like exactly what it was like.
Yeah. And it's not like Bismarcky where it's like singing bad on purpose.
No, it was supposed to be like good. And Carol and Howard are looking at her, holding their hands like, oh, we did such a good job.
Yeah.
And the director's like, he's watching so intently, like, oh, what did I get myself into? And it's a wild, weird thing. It's such a bizarre music video. And the fact that they just post this publicly for everybody to see, I think in this episode too, we learned that, no, I'm sorry, it's an episode that hasn't happened yet. We'll get to that later. But, yeah, it was just so, like, once again, another parallel between the big cat people. As far as I know, Doc doesn't have music videos, but he's got a big social media presence. He's shown, like, his Instagram and all these videos and stuff, and Joe's got the music videos, and Carol's got these music videos and social media posts, and they kind of just talk about that, and it's weird, but we wrote back, well, we see these, like, really weird things about Carol. Carol and Howard, once again, start talking about how there's only a certain amount of time in which a tiger is really useful to the tiger owners.
Yes.
And we talk about that a little before, too. And this is part of why they end up being moved and being transferred and whatnot between Joe, Doc, and Mario and Mark and all of them. But they really start to highlight it now by the end of the episode. They say, tigers just... There's only a certain amount of time where you're legally allowed to pet a tiger. After that, like, you can profit $100,000 on a cub. Even Joe himself admits this. After that point, tigers become less profitable and more expensive. Doc Antle even says in the first episode it costs $10,000 a year to feed each tiger. So the question remains, what do you do with the tiger when it's not profitable anymore? And it's never answered directly. It's kind of left a bit mysterious, but that question is posed. And Barbara, one of Doc's old employees, says, there used to be this tiger, like he was such a sweetheart. He used to listen to everything I said. I mean, he was just such a good tiger. So Eric says, what happened to him? She was like, we didn't really ask. That wasn't really our business. Doc used to tell us, I know where they go, and that's all that matters. Mm-hmm. And then we cut to Tim Stark, who also in another part that we mentioned Tim Stark before, he says that Doc and him and Joe, they were all friends for years, for a long time. And he told Doc once, the first time he went to his facility, I don't want you to teach me anything about animals. Tell me how you keep these women trained. So it's known in the industry that Doc Antle has a harem. But Tim says at the end of the episode, he says, one of the most important things he ever told Joe Exotic, you can't keep them all. That's a bad business decision. Because once a tiger gets out of that petting range, it's just a bill. Carol talks about how there have been many whistleblowers, not just for Doc and Joe's place, but for a lot of places. They'll say, we heard a gunshot in the middle of the night, and the tiger's not there anymore, but because we can't find the tiger, we can't prove anything happened to it. So then John Renke says, there's been a rumor for years that Doc Antle euthanizes his tigers. So then you get into this whole thing of like, there's this breadcrumb trail leading to the same answer, and it's not good. Whether it's the tigers being euthanized, the tigers being brought to substandard places, it's not good. It's a very disturbing thing. And it's like, okay, say what you will about Carol, but at the end of the day, she's trying to fix the problem that people like Joe and Doc are creating. She's not breeding the tigers. She's not letting anybody touch them. She's not euthanizing them when they get too old. Like, she's letting them live out the rest of their lives and grow old and have an okay life. Even if they're behind cages like Joe and Doc's places. Like, even if, like, she charges a certain admission for people to see the tigers, at least she's posing an answer for the question of what do we do about all these roadside zoos. And then we cut to Mark McCarthy, who says, she always acts like she's better than everybody else, but her place isn't really that good. Anytime anyone attacks her, she goes after him with millions of dollars she inherited from her missing husband. And then we cut to Mario, who says, Mario says, I think it was, she supposedly has a husband who's buried on her property. Then we cut to Doc Antle, who says, this lady's completely out of her gourd, and she seems, in my opinion, to have probably killed her own husband. Then we cut to Joe, who's convinced that not only did she kill her husband, but that she fed him to a tiger. So then it's like, okay, all the zoo people think this is true. Then we cut to a news report of somebody saying she is suspected by her ex-husband's family to have potentially fed him to a tiger. And that's where the episode ends.
Yeah. Which is just so crazy to think about, like, that's how the episode ends.
Yeah, it's the perfect cliffhanger to the perfect episode, in my opinion. It is just one twist after another, and you could never possibly see any of them coming. I mean, this isn't one of those shows you're like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. Oh, I saw that coming from a mile away. Like, it's just so wacky and wild, but everything fits with each other. Like, it's like there's this roller coaster of insanity that just, I don't know. It's like one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. If I could call one episode of Tiger King one of my favorite documentaries of all time, it would be episode 2 of Tiger King. This thing is masterfully done. And It's titled The Cult of Personality. The way it ties into everything, how the allure of exotic animals creates this obsession and this willingness to do whatever it takes for this cause. Whether it's the cause that Joe presents of taking care of these tigers, whether it's this conservation mission that Doc presents, whether it's this mission that Carol presents of saving them from exploitation, people will follow in droves and just listen to whatever they say. It's such a wild thing. And again, it's one of those things where it seems obvious that wherever your ranking is, whoever you think is worse, Joe or Doc, Carol is clearly the least bad. And then you're questioning that by the tail end of like, oh wait, did she kill her husband? It's masterfully done. It's a perfectly edited piece of entertainment, and I can't stop talking about how amazing it is.
Right. Yeah. No, it definitely is crazy, and for someone that was always so against Tiger King, it's very safe to say that this was the one that, when watching it, I was just like, okay. Even I'm like, what? I just almost needed to watch it just to have this somewhat explained to me. And I think I can understand why, after seeing it, it was such an important episode for us to watch. And for you to even be like, if you don't mess with the show after episode 2, I get it.
Yeah.
But you at least need to see episode 2.
Yes. Yeah, for me, this is the litmus test. This is Tiger King to me. This is what it's all about. This is what got people just like, oh my God. Episode 1 was a great setup, and episode 3 was the big meme of like, Carol killed her husband, like the big talk of the town type thing.
Right.
But in the middle is this thing that needs to hold it all together, this glue. And I think that's what it is. I think that this is like kind of what really just what eternalized this show as the thing that everybody was watching when they were stuck at home in the pandemic.
Oh yeah, 100%. Definitely. Just very, very wacky and very crazy, but very entertaining.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny too because episode 1 you were already like, I can't believe all of this is real.
Yeah.
If you accept the reality of episode 1, which I already had by the time I saw it, episode 2 is still like, there's no shot this is real. There's no way this is actually happening in America and that these are real people and not cartoon characters that were written as a work of fiction, Like, I don't know like how much you agree with that, but for me, this is like so much crazier than episode 1 of Tiger
Oh, no,
King.
100%.
I think this is so much more insane.
Absolutely, because like what we said when we first started talking about it, within 5 minutes of the episode, you're already like, oh my, what? Like, how is that? This is insane. The first, 5-10 minutes of episode 1, you're kind of like, this is just weird, but like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. I remember my biggest thing when I saw episode 1, I'm like, okay, Joe is a little out there, but I'm like, Carol's like kind of quirky and weird, and Docky's like an egocentric, whatever guy, but I'm like, people like this exist in the real world, right?
Yeah.
And then in episode 2, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
100%.
There's no shot. There is no shot. So yeah, any final thoughts?
Definitely would say that episode 2 was better than the first one. Which is interesting because I already gave episode 1 like a good rating.
You gave it a favorable review. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say episode 2 is better.
Yeah.
And more entertaining and a lot more of like exactly like what you said. Not only was it a good episode, but it was a great ending.
Yes. It's a perfect
great
cliffhanger.
episode.
Yes.
Yeah. It does a great job of all these crazy things we talked about. You just have to wait until the next episode to see about this crazy thing that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. So I'm definitely you know, very interested
Yeah.
to see where this all goes.
Well, it's interesting too because we did see episode 3, and
Yeah.
we'll be reviewing it next episode. But there's still so much more to be had, so much more wackiness and absurdity to be had in the world of Tiger King. But yeah, this is my favorite episode. This is what really made me stay with the show and just foster my own obsession with this whole world of exotic animal ownership and a lot of these characters, many of whom I've researched meticulously, some of whom I've spoken to on personal level, a couple of them, but it's just a complete train wreck that you can't keep your eyes away from. And I think that I truly think that this episode is masterfully done. It's masterfully edited. The subjects that they got, the things that they got them to say and do on camera, it's just totally out of this world. And it's informative in many respects. It's this great informational piece on the wildlife trafficking industry and how easy it is to corrupt and manipulate and exploit people. If I were to give it a ranking, like a rating, it'd be an easy 10 out of 10 for me. I think that this is the perfect... If this was stretched out to full-length documentary feature, this would be one of my favorite documentaries ever. It's hard for me to say that about Tiger King as a whole. I don't know if I would, but this particular episode is perfection. I love everything about it, from its absurd hook to its absurd ending, and in every absurd eccentricity that happens in the middle. It gets 5 stars from me.
Yeah, I probably would say that if they kept it like this, like what you said, for a full-length documentary where they just kept it at this level of wacky, crazy, everything, it would have been even 10 times like, oh my gosh, like, you have to watch this. Even, I mean, like, look at it now. It's still like that. But
yes,
if the whole entire show stayed as episode 2, I would say that it would still be talked about.
Oh, 100%. I completely believe that. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting conversation. It would definitely be big. I think that this is generally agreed upon. Tiger King would have never been as big as it was if it wasn't for the pandemic. I mean,
I think so.
It was like the biggest thing in the world when that came out. But it would still be big. I think it would still be like Making a Murderer level, or like Jeffrey Dahmer show level of like, yeah, a lot of people saw it, a lot of people talked about it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the thing about this show is that, like, even if you've never seen it, everyone knows the names Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin.
Yeah.
Everybody does. It's like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader at this point,
Exactly.
Like, it's left that much of a cultural imprint, even if you don't know anything about the show. So it kind of speaks volumes to how much it took off. But would you give the episode like a rating or anything like that? Because it's a perfect 10 for me. I'm not going to judge you if you don't agree per se, but I
feel like I can't give it a full rating. Like, I can't give it a 10 out of 10.
How dare you?
Because I haven't finished the show.
Okay, that's fair.
I feel like in order for me to fully say, like, this was a 10 out of 10 for me, I have to see the quality of other episodes.
That's fair. That's understandable.
But if I would rate it by itself, I would give it a 9 out of 10. Okay. I think it was an actual, like, a very entertaining, it hooks you in, and, credit to both of the directors. Mm-hmm. They did an incredible job with this episode because, like what you said, it was almost like everything made sense.
Yes. There was a method to the madness. It wasn't randomness.
Yes.
It was just... And that's what made me so impressed, is that you've got these topics of, like, tiger maulings, and then wildlife trafficking, and then drug kingpins, and then cults, and then... and then like polyamorous weddings and missing husbands, and it all fits within the same 45-minute episode. And I'm like, how did you do that so so well and so masterfully. But
Yeah.
I props to the filmmakers, the editors who must have had so much footage to work with. And I almost have to wonder, like, what did we not see? You know, like, what was not shown? It's something I've always wondered about Tiger King, because extra footage was used for the 2 other spin-off series that came out 2 years ago now, which also, like, revealed a lot of, like, really crazy stuff. There's some, like, wild footage of Doc in his show, but it's very impressive that they took all of this insane footage and they're like, we just don't know which ones not to use, and they've woven them all into this cohesive narrative that does leave you going, like, what the heck is going on here, but still has narrative cohesion, still has a flow to it. And I don't know, I'm very blown away by this episode, and I'm very happy we got to talk about it.
Yeah. No, it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. I'm happy you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I am too. It was very good.
So it is getting late, so I think we'll cap off with one more topic and maybe move on to something else.
Okay.
What do you prefer? You want to talk about Guardians, or what else do we have on the list?
We have the trilogy, seeing it in
The
theaters.
trilogy. Oh boy.
I mean, let me ask you. Do you really want to be talking about Star Wars? That's something super meaningful to both you and I, on something where it's already kind of late and we want to cap it?
Maybe we should cap it at Guardians, because we all said it was going to be a spoiler-free review, so maybe it'll be kind of brief.
Yeah, that's fair.
Sure. So you saw Guardians before I did. You saw it opening night?
Opening night.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. I saw it maybe a week or 2 after you did. So maybe you want to introduce however you want to do it.
Sure, yeah. Well, something I will say before we start with Guardians 3, next episode will be very fun because we will be talking about that Pat and I were able to experience the original Star Wars trilogy
In theaters.
in theaters, and
A little out of order, but still we did it.
we still did it, and it was something that, as long as we've known each other, we have said multiple times, man, like, just how cool would it have been to, like, be there in, like, 77 or be there in 80 or to be there in 82 or
Even just to see it now in theaters is something we thought we'd have a hard time doing.
yeah, and we finally did it,
All
and
in 1 year, all within the span of 6 months,
yes,
which is wild to think
all
about.
all in 1 year, all in 6 months. And the funny thing is, and the entertaining thing about it is, each movie that we saw has a story to it.
Yes.
So that will be
So
for
you
next
know
episode.
what? That's probably why we should definitely
Yes.
save it for another episode. So we'll move on to Guardians.
So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 came out in April. April? No,
Excuse me
May.
one sec. Chris, can you please stop talking? Okay, you're being very loud.
I'm
I'm sorry, guys. I know he's being obnoxious.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So what a chatterbox.
If you guys think we're actually lying about him here, he
No,
is
he's
here.
here. Yeah,
he
he
is
just doesn't wanna
literally
talk.
like, we are just looking at him right now. He is on his phone right now, wearing the same shirt that
I
we
love
are
how he
wearing.
said, like, yeah, I'm going to talk eventually.
Yeah, like, I'll say something, but maybe we'll see as we're wrapping up. But Guardians of the Galaxy 3 came out first week of May, and while this movie was being made, we heard so many different rumors, like, okay, we're finally going to see what Rocket's backstory is. We're
Right.
going to finally see, how they're going to really talk about these characters. We're really going to see, because as we talked about last episode, there is a point in time where real life turns into, and it falls into the media of what we talk about.
Yeah. How much did we discuss that? Oh, we did. We because we talked about James Gunn last episode.
Yes, but we didn't talk about Guardians of the Galaxy. We just
Okay.
talked about how he has the vision of no longer using Henry Cavill as Superman.
Okay, we didn't talk about, like, what happened to him to get
No.
to the point of...
We
okay.
talked about that in the unreleased episode.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, then to briefly recap, back in 2018, I think it was, there were some old tweets, like very old tweets, dug up from...
This was, I think, I would probably say maybe 2019 then, because 2018...
Maybe. I don't remember.
2018 was Infinity War. So I don't know. I don't remember Infinity War coming out as the same time as these.
I think it was like later after. I know it was after Infinity War came out.
So maybe after
But-
Endgame then.
I don't know if it was after Endgame because I think it was. Because I think I remember. I remember making Gotti memes, like because 2018 was the year Gotti came out,
Right.
and I remember making those memes around the same time I was unironically ranting about what happened to James Gunn. So I'm gonna say 2018. I could be wrong.
Okay.
It's got to be like around the 2018 2019
Yeah.
time frame. Is
But
what
go
we can
on.
agree on, but. So there were some old tweets that were dug up about James Gunn that were very unsavory, very inappropriate. They were jokes, obviously, but they were really gross jokes that he had apologized for. He said, like, listen, that's not indicative of who I am, because back when he made those tweets, he used to make really edgy movies like Slither and Super and stuff, and he was just of a different kind of sensibility than making Guardians of the Galaxy, which is more of a fun for the whole family type adventure.
Right.
But he was confronted about it, and he apologized for it. He said, like, that's just not the type of guy I am now. I don't really make jokes like that anymore. But whatever you want to call it, cancel culture and whatnot, Disney was not happy with it, and they felt that they were getting a lot of media attention from it, so they decided to let him go. Which I had protested vehemently back then. I said that I just thought that he did the right thing. Like, he apologized. Like, what do you want him to do now? It was a different time. Like, it was like 5 or 10 years before, the events of whatever. It was, I think, 5 or 10 years before Guardians came out, honestly. But he apologized for it. He said he was wrong and said he wouldn't do it again. Like, I don't know. It's like, it was just such a stupid thing. And they just fired over it, and there was like a lot of division over it. Like, some people in the MCU actually thought it was a good idea. They thought that it was unacceptable, and other people thought
Chris Pratt,
Dave and all
Bautista.
the Guardians said this was terrible. What happened
Yeah.
to him?
I'm pretty sure even that Chris Pratt said because at this point, none of Guardians 3 was
had
made.
been shot. Yeah,
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I do remember that Chris Pratt and Dave Bautista both said that if James Gunn was not going to be the one
and
directing
they're
this
not
movie,
coming back.
that they
Yeah,
were
I
not going
remember
to do
that.
this.
I think a few other people too. I think
Yeah.
Zoe Saldana might have said that too.
I think
Like,
Vin Diesel too.
I'm sure. Yeah. It's a lot of people supported him, and eventually he got his job back, but in the midst of that, DC was like, "Hey, listen, we're not too triggered by what you did. Why don't you come over and make a movie for us?" And,
Yeah, DC's a little bit loose about that kind of rule.
well,
but-
that's true. But
But yeah,
I do have to say it ended up with one of the best DCEU movies we have, The Suicide
100%.
Squad. And then we still got to get Guardians 3 the way it was supposed to be. So
Right.
now James Gunn's on top of the superhero world because he got canceled, which is kind of funny.
and even whether you want to agree with his decisions yet or not, he is now going to be the head honcho at DC,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you can already tell that he's got a plan.
Oh, definitely.
He has a plan, like I said, whether you like it or not. He does have a plan for the upcoming years.
Yeah, I'm going to trust the process because I've just loved everything he's done that I'm just like, you know what? Let's see where it goes.
Right. So Guardians 3 comes out, and as media starts tackling about Guardians 3 before it comes out, there's through trailers, through all these YouTube channels, all these Easter eggs, everything, we start seeing, okay, we are going to see rockets pass. We are going to see this. We are going to see that. And also, in terms of real world turning into the media, Dave Bautista did announce that he was not coming back after Guardians 3. So that was something very interesting to talk about because obviously people then started saying, okay, well, Drax has to die then.
Right.
Drax is going to die, and that's how the story is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have all these, and it's something that I respect, yet also, just am so bewildered by it,
Mm-hmm.
is you have all these people that like they take like the milliseconds of trailers and
Yes,
they're like, look at this right
They
here.
dissect
Like,
it.
yeah.
They're like, this must imply that this happened.
Right.
Because if you call back to this movie, this character said this.
Yep.
And this is clearly represented. This purely. Can you just wait for the movie to come out and
Yeah.
enjoy whatever the movie has to offer?
And a specific scene in the trailer is you see Chris Pratt crying. And this isn't a spoiler because it's in the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
People then started saying, okay, we see a wire towards where he's crying. It almost looks like a ventilator. So people started theorizing, okay, this is going to be the comic book that they're going to take from, I believe it's early 2000s, where they kill off Rocket.
Right.
In a Guardians of the Galaxy comic book, I believe he developed some sort of illness, and it's this panel where all the Guardians are together and they're saying goodbye to their friend.
Right.
And people are saying, okay, this is it. We're gonna see Drax die. We're gonna see Rocket die.
Or we could see Drax die, or Rocket die, or Rocket die, or Drax die, and there are like a lot of other these questions too. Like, is Chris Pratt gonna come back? Like, Star-Lord die? Like, how Yondu sacrificed himself in the previous movie, or
Yes,
are we
exactly.
like a lot of other questions too. I'm trying to think of,
And also when
like Gamora, I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
Like, what's the situation going to be like there, because she died in Infinity War, and then
Endgame.
a past variant of her came back in Endgame. So what's going to happen there?
how are you gonna tackle that?
Right. Are her and Peter going to get back together? Is that the real her? Like, do they have like chemistry anymore? Are they going to find a way to re-access her memory through some space magic or something? Like, what's the deal here? Or are they just not going to like end up? Are they just two different people at this point? And so it left us with a lot of questions and and a lot of speculation, obviously. And James Gunn had famously said this was the last one he wanted to make. So,
And he also said that this one was going to be very emotional.
Yes.
And a lot of, I believe, a lot of the characters said that this was like the hardest movie they made,
Mm-hmm.
where like it was like just super like grueling and daunting to make, not work wise, but emotional wise.
Right.
Where it was just very sad to make, and it was just very emotional making it.
we knew there was going to be some finality to this. And in a way, I was a little bummed out about that at first, because something I always liked about the Guardians of the Galaxy movies is that they felt like these disconnected, not from each other, but from the rest of the MCU. They felt like these disconnected space adventure movies that you could make like 20 of. That's kind of like always the vibe I got from them. Like they're more easygoing popcorn movies, very colorful, they're fun, and like everyone's got like these laser beams. They go all to these different planets and stuff. Like it's like Star Wars on steroids in a weird way. And I love that because they always had the same chemistry that the Star Wars characters had with each other. And even when serious things happened in the first two movies, there was still something about it that I just always felt so much more like this is a lot less serious than what's going on in Civil War
100%.
and what's going on in The Winter Soldier and stuff. And I like that. And so to hear that the third one was going to go a more dramatic route, I was a little bummed out about, but I was still willing to give it a chance because I love these characters so much. And I just really do love the first two movies like a lot. So I'm like, you know what? Let's see what you got, James Gunn.
And wow. To the respect of, we still want to keep this as spoiler free as possible.
We're going to try and keep it as spoiler free as possible, yeah.
He was not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He was not wrong when he said that this is the last one. He was not wrong when he said this was going to be an emotional roller coaster. He was not wrong about all of that, because throughout the whole entire movie, you definitely get the vibe of this is it. Like
within the first 10 minutes, really.
With a lot of these quote unquote, this is it, this is a finale, you don't really know, because there are some where it's like they still leave room
You
to
could
like,
still do something
you
else
could like
here.
squeeze like a spin-off, you could squeeze like a movie.
And I'll say this, you could do more with this section of the MCU. You still could.
You could still squeeze in things with certain characters, but I would say the whole team itself,
The team that we know as the Guardians of the Galaxy, like this was the one last journey.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
Yeah, and yeah, it was super, 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 super emotional. James Gunn did a really great job making it fun, making it funny, but still making it very emotional, very sad, very powerful still.
Yeah. Well, this is the interesting thing because I said before that what I've loved about James Gunn's Guardians movies is that they're much more easygoing than a lot of the other MCU movies. They're more fun, they're more popcorn film driven. And this still has a lot of that. This still has the same type of humor. This has the same type of heart. This has the same type of just ridiculous, what the heck is going on here moments. And there's a lot of that, especially around like the start to the middle of the film. There's a lot of like really weird, like funny, goofy stuff. That's very Guardians of the Galaxy. But Guardians has also, in appropriate moments, been drenched in tragedy. From the beginning, Peter Quill loses his mom in the first 5 minutes of Guardians 1. In Guardians 2, you find out that his real dad's a terrible person who was the one who killed his mom. And then his adoptive father, who didn't seem that great before, but kind of redeems himself, Yondu, ends up sacrificing himself. So it's just a lot of tragedy does engulf this. And we also get a little hints of Rocket's backstory about how he had a bit of a raw deal in life. We know that Drax no longer has a family anymore. A lot of like these really terrible, dramatic things, but they're able to make light of it with fun, awesome space adventures. And we dive so much deeper into the tragic elements. And the more I think about it, the more I'm glad we talked about Guardians instead of Star Wars, because we can loop this back to Tiger King when it comes to animal exploitation.
Yeah.
Because that's a big theme here that's going on in this this movie. The villain of the film, what's his name, like the High Inquisitor or something? I forget his exact name, but first of all, it's funny. He exploits animals. He's got a god complex, and he's got a little soul patch right here.
Yep.
So,
coincidence?
I'm wondering if James Gunn took some liberties there. But anyway, he wants to start this perfect universe, and he wants it to be animal driven. And the way he gets to that place is doing experiments on animals to try and mold them to be perfect.
Like humanoids.
Like
basically.
humanoid, perfect beings. And the conditions that these animals are kept in, with little baby Rocket being one of them, and he's got a series of friends and a bunch of animals around them, is very familiar to the way real animals are treated when it comes to chemical testing or private zoos and stuff. And it's this gritty realism, like the dirt and the grime you see on the cages, that just sort of brings you down to planet Earth and think like, oh, there are some real world consequences to what's going on here. And Rocket Raccoon, this character that we followed for 3 movies, who we've grown to really love and have a big heart for. And I mean, actually more than 3 movies, because he was in Infinity War and Endgame too. To see that he just never really had much of a happy moment in his life growing up, and the little drips of hope that he had were kind of taken away from him without giving too much away. It's so sad because we've loved Rocket for all of these movies, and he's been a great comedic side character. But to like learn that everything about him, from his quirks to his obsession with technology and weaponry and ships and the jokes he makes and the things he says, like they all tie back into his past.
Yeah, and also his temper.
Yes.
Because, I mean, throughout both the first movie, the second movie, Infinity War, Endgame, like what Pat said, you know, we always got little slivers of his backstory, but it was always like, I don't want, like, you know, like he always brushed it off. He like never really wanted, like even
He
in the
never
first
wanted it
movie,
discussed. Yeah.
even in the first movie, he is pointing this huge gun at Drax because they're getting in a fight, and Star Lord is saying like, "What the heck is going on?" And he said he called me vermin, and
Yep.
he, you know, people just look at me and they think I'm some kind of a monster, and he goes, "Well, let me show you what kind of a monster I really am." And he like cocks this like enormous weapon, and you're like, okay, this guy like has a temper, but you in this movie you like really see like that was molded into him like ever since, you know, young.
Yes.
And and even like throughout the whole entire movie, not just even in learning about his backstory, you just already feel for him. I like what we want to say without giving too much away.
Yes, definitely.
Almost like the whole premise of the movie is the, I guess, the importance of Rocket.
Definitely. Yeah, it's Rocket's movie. I mean, everybody has their time to shine. And that's what makes it a great Guardians movie, is that everybody has a great moment. Everybody really does. And everybody gets equitable screen time around Rocket's prominence in the film. We get a lot from Peter. We get a lot from Drax. We get a lot from Mantis. All of these characters we've grown to know and love. And a lot about their backstory and a lot about the tragedy that surrounds them and a lot about what could potentially happen to them in the future or just later in the movie if they have no future after that. It's all balanced really, really well. And they all speak to each other really well, and they've got great dialogue with each other that's really funny, but it could also be really touching and heartwarming. And what I found so impressive was you could tell that James Gunn has been building this point meticulously since he made Guardians 1, and that he's thought so long and so carefully about Rocket's backstory. When I see prequels and flashbacks that are done after the fact, way after the fact, I have a hard time being convinced when I watch the OGs, the originals, of that backstory. Like, I don't really watch the original Star Wars trilogy and think too much of the prequels. Maybe a couple things here and there, but a lot of things I'm like, okay, I don't watch the original trilogies and think of Qui-Gon Jinn as even being like a real person, whatever. I don't watch the Lord of the Rings movies and think of The Hobbit. It's a hard thing for me to like really get tethered to.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree.
I really want to know what you find funny. I know it's something Chris did, but
anyways,
why did you call me?
I called you? Wait.
Oh, man. Are we in the middle of this again? Wait.
We're not doing this, like,
please check if you called me.
No, I didn't call you. We're not... Okay, so as we're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, Pat has gotten a phone call again.
Did I get a voicemail from you too?
See if you did.
No, nothing.
But to agree with what you said, this is definitely... It's very obvious that James Gunn has thought about this for a very long time.
Definitely.
And he thought of every single aspect, because it's almost as if, like, even when the first movie came out, it was like he knew at that moment what was going to happen. Like, for instance, they focus on... There's that shot when Peter and Rocket are in the prison in the first movie, when Rocket is shirtless, and they focus on his back, and like Peter's like kind of like what's on his back, like what are those like that like shaven back, what is all those like kind of gruesome, grotesque lines on his back.
Mm-hmm.
And long and behold, we learn about all of that.
Yeah.
So it's very noticeable that this has been a work in progress for quite some time.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's meticulously driven. It's very well done, and I'm just very impressed by the quality of this movie, and I really want to know what Chris and Sebby are laughing about.
I'm
Is
just
it not allowed to be said
actually-
on the podcast or something?
I just find it very funny that you got a phone call while we were recording, and we literally just said that this is still an unraveling mystery.
Uh-huh.
But
And Chris finds that funny too?
I don't know. I don't know why he's laughing. But so yeah, no, Guardians
Oh.
3.
Okay.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Which ones did Guardians 3 rank the top for you of all the Guardians movies?
So believe it or not, and I hate to say it, I do think this is my least favorite.
Really?
I will actually say that. And some people are saying this is their favorite MCU movie.
Yeah.
I do have to admit I've got criticisms. Not like heavy,
Right.
but I don't know. It's hard for me
Do
because
you think you can say them without getting into spoilers?
yes, I do. I think that 20 minutes of this movie could probably be shaved off. I think that there are moments that are maybe like a little too comedic, or like the way that the jokey element of it was played wasn't handled as well as it could have been, I think. And I think as much as it being rocket centric was important, I think they could have eased up on it a little bit just to give more Guardians time. And ultimately, like, not even really a criticism, but it's just a matter of like, did this movie blow me away? No. But did it impress me? Yes. It absolutely did. I understand why it's taken the world by storm and why people love it so much. And I really, really like it. I just think I like the first two a little bit more. I think 2 might be my favorite. I know it's people's least favorites typically, but I really love that movie. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like I had something else I wanted to say. I don't remember what it was. But I definitely think it's one of the best MCU movies to come out in a really long time.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what I wanted to say. And this is the biggest testament I can give the film. When it comes to movies, and especially seeing them in a theater, I'm not really a crier. Like, it's kind of hard for me to like get to that point in front of a group of people. There have been a couple of exceptions. And I'll tell you one when it comes to the MCU. It was not Endgame. For a
Okay.
lot of people, it was Endgame.
Yeah, it was definitely Endgame for me.
Mhm.
Endgame was rough for me.
I didn't shed a tear during Endgame. I had a person sitting right next to me, a buddy of mine at the time, was like bawling when he
Yeah.
saw Endgame. And a lot of people just were. I knew people who didn't cry the first time, but cried like the second time or the third time, like really hit and it registered what had
Yeah.
happened at the end of that movie. Wasn't one of those people. I mean, it's great, it's effective, it's not a criticism. It just didn't affect me in that
Yeah.
way. Spider-Man No Way Home,
Yep,
that did get me. And I
That got
genuinely,
me.
I was like,
multiple times.
oh man.
Multiple times.
Oh, this is hard.
There was, I would say and I think I can be the one to say this because I've seen the movie 10 times
Sure.
in theaters. Swag. There were multiple moments that really like hit me, and I think we can kind of talk about it now.
Well, for me, No Way Home was just one moment.
What was it for you?
It was Aunt May.
Yeah.
100%, because like that was just this character that I grew up with and saw incarnated multiple times, and it just never occurred to me that she would die, and especially not Marissa Tomei, who's like
The youngest
and
Yep.
most sprightly, and just she's been more of a background character, and she's been more comedic, but very supportive, a strong character in her own right. Never really occurred to me that she could die. And she
Yeah.
did very unexpectedly, and it just got me. I wasn't bawling, but it did get me. Like, tears were coming out of my eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, man, this is wild. But we could talk about No Way Home another.
Oh no,
day.
yeah, but I would also say like, but what you said about Aunt May, I think why it got me was because I then knew like what that meant
Well, that's the thing.
for the character.
I knew what was happening when she told Peter, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the Uncle Ben moment. Okay.
Yeah.
I see what's happening now.
That, and also like, okay, this is the very first time. Well, not first time, but this is the.
It's hard. It's
second
the first time we
time.
see. Oh, that's true. Actually, yeah. One could argue that like Tony Stark was his Uncle
Yeah.
Ben too. But...
Like this is the very first time where we see this Peter Parker get the quote unquote Peter Parker luck.
Right.
And get that Peter Parker pain.
Mm-hmm.
And really suffer.
Well, the thing is, too, he had to share that suffering with a lot of other people when it came to Tony Stark.
Yeah.
So this is why Aunt May hit a lot harder, because that was him. That was his... The woman raised him.
Yeah, and what hits is not only the death itself, but also like what happens after. Like you have the security guards coming in, you have them pointing their guns, and then you have Happy try to save him and be like, Peter, run! And like he's getting arrested. Peter still gets shot and he has to run, and like it's just this emotional scene. And the last shot of the scene is Aunt May dying, and then you see a tear fall from her eyes.
Right.
Which is already emotional.
Yeah.
So this is already one of those moments, but to what you were saying about you don't really cry.
Yeah. Well, like I said, like No Way Home got me. Like tears are coming out of my eyes. But still, I never really bawled in any movie, actually, really. Guardians 3, man, that one actually did get to me. And I think that's all I'll say. Because I think if I gave out any hints, it would be too much of a spoiler. But it's just one of those things where I was like, I remember you saw the movie before I did. You told me bring tissues. I'm like, I don't know about that. It's a little silly. I wish I did. I really did. I would look like an idiot in that theater. I was like, I went by myself too. I didn't go with anybody, and so there were strangers in the theater. They didn't know me, and they were just seeing the. Granted, I heard tears coming from all across the theater. So I was not. They were the same moments. They were the same type of thing. But even still, it was just like total helplessness on my part. I mean, and credit to the movie, credit to James Gunn. It worked. It really did.
Right.
It was. And again, I hate to say that it's my least favorite Guardians movie, but that's really to me a testament to how much I love the Guardians movies. It's not a criticism of this movie. It's a very good movie. I'm very glad that I saw it. Maybe I would rank it higher the next time I saw it. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'd be happy to watch it again. I more than likely will. I'll definitely buy this movie on Blu-ray and watch it again. I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed it. And if you've lost hope in Marvel, some people are saying this is kind of like
just
the
about
epilogue,
to ask you
like
that.
the conclusion.
Yeah.
Whether or not I agree with that, I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I know I said last episode Marvel might kind of be done. It's hard.
Because I was going to ask you, did this kind of like jumpstart your, I guess, hope for Marvel? Do you think this jumpstarted?
It's hard for me to say that because the Guardians movies are so disconnected from the other Marvel films, and this is the end of a trilogy. Yeah. Now, granted, there's potential for other stuff in the future with other characters and other sections of the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of universe because, remember, these movies don't take place on Earth, and there are a lot of colorful characters and locations we've met. There's a lot that you can do here. There absolutely is. And maybe it's good. I'd love to see it. But as far as me seeing Guardians 3 and being like, oh, man, Marvel, you're finally on the right track again, James Gunn's just kind of always been doing his thing. And for me, the MCU, I've liked consistently. I seldom love it. I almost never really love MCU movies. It's the Guardians movies notoriously for a while were some of the only ones I loved. So for James Gunn to be the only one who's going out on a good note right now, I hate to say I told you so, but that's been my mindset for a while. So I hate to be cynical, but no, it doesn't really revitalize my hope in Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely very interesting because we have Secret Invasion coming out, so we'll see.
We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, we will see what happens.
Oh, Secret Invasion. Oh, yeah, that's a show coming out. Oh, hopefully that's good. I was thinking the Secret Wars.
Yeah, Well, I mean, we'll also see what happens because to do a kind of a quick follow up of last episode. Still,
No real word on
no real word
Jonathan
on what's going on
Majors
with.
or
Yeah,
whatever. We'll see. I don't know. They could be playing the long game here, and we'll see what happens with the Flash too and Ezra Miller. You know,
yeah,
which is a different conversation, but it's the same sort of category.
for sure, absolutely. And I think with that we say I think this is the end of episode 2.
I would say so. It's been a pleasure.
All right, you guys. Thank you all you cool
Hey, all
cats
you cool
and
cats and
kittens.
I actually regret not opening it up this way, but we've got other episodes of Tiger King to talk about. I'll do it one of these days.
And you know me, I will find some way to mesh into the things that I know as much as Pat knows Tiger King, so we'll see where
we
it
should
goes.
start an episode where, like, before we start recording, I'm like, oh, if you want to film here, you know, this is my crib. You know,
Yeah.
we should go. And I'll say like, hi, Sebby, how are you doing? And you know,
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. But thank you guys for listening, and you guys take care.
have a good one. See you later.